Welcome to Moments That Matter, a podcast that looks at the moments in our lives that come along from time to time that have consequences long after the moment, especially those moments that have to do with the choice of vocation. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation, Parker Palmer speaks of a clearness committee in the Quaker tradition, wherein a group of older, wiser people ask questions of someone considering a life choice, as a way of clarifying the next step. We may not meet with a committee about these big decisions, but we all have these critical junctures in our lives which we can think of as clearness committee moments. We need to pay attention to these moments because they are profound and potentially life-altering. We will relay stories from our lives and interview others about theirs, especially noting the clearness committee moments, those we chose to recognize and those that were sadly ignored, those decisions that were made with God in mind and those that were not. Our hope is that these podcasts will cause you to think of the same kind of moments in your life with new clarity. Well, today we have the privilege of being joined by Kyra Hood. Kyra is a junior at Southern Wesleyan University, majoring in psychology and minoring in Christian ministry. And she's super active here at SWU as an athlete in cross country and track and field. And she frequently participates in musicals here on campus. Kyra is the founder of SWU Environmentalists, an organization that seeks to lead the campus and community in a lifestyle that is sustainable and more environmentally friendly, specifically focused on recycling, community involvement, and educating others on issues involving environmental concerns. Which brings us to our topic of discussion today. Kyra, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Moments That Matter.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I met Kyra a little over a year ago when I heard rumors that we had a student looking to start an environmental group on campus, and I soon discovered that she was a kindred spirit who loves the environment. And we are recording this podcast in honor of Earth Day, April the 22nd, 2020. I think this is a great point to start. Kyra, I've heard you share this several times before, but take us back to the beginning. What influences led you sort of to reevaluate your views of environmental health?
So it was about, I think, 2 years ago now, and it started because of social media. I was like a fan of the musical Hamilton, and so I had just found that and was following all of the cast members, and I was really obsessed with it. And one of the cast members had started posting about plastic pollution, and she had posted specifically about ocean pollution and all of the trash that was on the shore of the ocean, and it just kind of caught my attention. And she started pretty regularly posting about different swaps that she had made to be more environmentally conscious. And so that kind of led me to do some of my own research, and I kind of felt like a conviction for the things I was doing, like how many plastic water bottles I was drinking a day. It was probably like 6 plastic water bottles a day every day for like years that I was using. And so I started researching and learning about zero waste lifestyles. And being in the South, we don't have, like, it's not super common to be environmentally friendly, like it's much more common in the West. So it wasn't surprising that I had never heard of zero waste or shopping in bulk or composting. And so that was something that kind of like struck me, like what most of our society does. You have this thing, you use it. So it's like take, make, dispose mentality. And then a circular economy is much more sustainable, and because products can be reused again. So it's like a make, use, return, or make, consume, enrich. So that's like when you compost and things break down to keep producing, to think about like the things that I'm buying, like single-use plastics at a restaurant, or just like little small things that are so easy that you don't even think twice about getting. That led me to reevaluate my views on the environment.
Yeah, that's so good. I think if people kind of get this antenna and start to see, wait a minute, I'm using this plastic object only one time and then it is disposed of. I think that term single-use plastic has such a broad reach of things that we don't even think about. And all of a sudden, when you kind of zone in on those things, you realize, wow, there are so many that pop up everywhere. And I know just in the time that we've known each other, they've talked about banning single-use plastics in certain countries in the world. And there was even maybe some legislation that was introduced, kind of toying around with that idea here in America. Where do you see, at least here in America, probably for our current time, the most pressing environmental issues?
There's like so many, and they're all kind of connected. Like plastic pollution, I think is a really big one because each individual person can control their plastic pollution, but then like air pollution and climate change and like deforestation are all really big too, because they all work together, and like the changes that shutting everything down has made on the environment. But like you think about like climate change, and like some people don't really believe in climate change, but trees, they kind of replace and balance the atmosphere. So if we're taking down the trees and putting up more buildings, then like it's not creating a balance anymore. So I think that's definitely a huge issue. But then I think that's something that we can't really control. That's kind of at a higher level. So I think like trash and plastic pollution is something that we can control, like individually, each person. So I think that those two kind of are, I think, like two of the biggest ones.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember when I was in college, I was part of an environmental awareness club on our university's campus, and we tried to educate people as best we could. And I'll never forget this statistic that really seemed to hit home. For the size of our campus, it was like every 30 minutes, an area of the world the size of our campus was deforested. When you put that into perspective, it was such a shocking statistic to recognize what we were actively doing, that it's almost like education was such a big part of environmental issues, because people just don't think about it and they don't know. And actually, you brought up something that I think is so interesting. Over the last few weeks, while the world has sort of been on this lockdown, there has been some really interesting sort of revelations of how just a temporary shutdown that we've experienced has dramatically improved the world. I saw an article about the canals in Venice and how people were starting to see the fish because the water was getting clearer. The air pollution has dramatically been reduced. And do you think that these changes will be significant enough to show people, hey, we actually can do something if we're smart and affect the world on a big scale?
I hope so. I think because we've had so much free time too, like I'm sure you guys have seen, like, walking outside, so many more people are outside now. So I'm hoping that creates a greater appreciation for nature because of this. But yeah, like I saw like a news report about the cleaner air and the clearer water, and they were like talking about, is this going to affect how we do things in the future when everything can go back to normal? Like seeing how China now, like you can see down the road because it's so clear, and how like negatively it affects your lungs and like sicknesses and stuff. So hopefully that this brings some kind of good change, maybe makes people think more about how often they're driving and plan out their trips better. So I'm hoping so, yeah.
One of the things that was mentioned, is like strategies and that sort of thing, is recycling. And in this country, that's pretty much a lot of what we do. Mm-hmm. We don't have much of a greening movement like it seems like other countries do. And in 2012, I was at a greening conference actually in Germany. And they have a bunch of those, and we don't seem to. But anyway, and I was one of two Americans that were there. And strangely, this guy was also from South Carolina. And the speaker said something that was like just stunning to us. He said that if you're, sustainability strategy is recycling, then you don't have a sustainability strategy. And then the conference went on, and people started making these amazing presentations about what they were doing with hydroponic gardens and all these other things. You know, it was just, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for us as Americans. Where would you like to see us in 10 or 20 years in terms of, you know, awareness and lifestyle, and maybe it does relate to what's going on right now, you know, with the quarantining and everything?
You know, I've always, when I got into this, I heard most people talking about recycling being the last to sustainability and environmentalism. One of the things that one of the speakers that I had listened to talks about, like 5 R's. There's refuse, reduce, reuse, rot, and then recycle as a last resort. So I think that the best thing is like a consumer level. Like, we are like always bombarded with so many things to buy and consume that, like, the first step is to refuse what you don't need. Like, you don't have to take all of this free stuff. We don't have to take like all of these things. And it's hard when you make the swap, because like, you kind of want to buy all the new stuff. You're like, oh, let me go buy a reusable water bottle. Let me buy this like stainless steel razor. Let me buy this and this and this and this, like stainless steel containers instead of plastic containers, and then you throw it all away. And then you made all of that trash out of stuff that was perfectly usable. So I think that we need to spend more time educating like the younger generations and current generations, like what the issues are and what you can do. Because like if you know what the issues are, then there's the awareness, but then it's like, what next? So we need to know like those easy things. There's easy things that you can do, like refuse what you don't need, reduce what you're consuming, like reduce your plastic use, reduce like how much you leave the lights on in your house, reuse what you already have. Rot was composting. So if you're able to compost, like give it back to the earth. Anything that comes from the earth can go back into the earth. And then recycle as a last resort thing. If you can't do any of those other 4, then you should recycle and buy things that are recyclable. So just kind of like a mindfulness and educating people, because America does a really bad job educating about environmental things. And like, we know other countries who do plastic bag bans now, and like there's fines if you have a plastic bag. Like if we did something like that, then that would definitely get it in people's head that we need to be doing a better job, because what these plastic bags are having a big negative impact on the environment and on animals and the oceans. And it all comes back, like what's in the ocean, like filters back into the water we drink. And so like, you know, you don't want to be drinking and eating all these microplastics that you're feeding into the fish and you're eating. That's just gross.
Yeah, and to your point about education, that we do start very late. Every semester in my education ethics class, we take a moment and talk about sustainability as a way of saying, like, you could teach your students about this, you know, at a much younger age. And we do this quiz. I guess you're familiar with this. The one that I found today is Ecological Footprint Calculator. But there are others, and so you just go through and you answer a lot of questions about your lifestyle. And what we do is we just take averages, like for the whole class, you know, and inevitably, when we get done entering all of the information about our lifestyles, when it calculates how many Earths would be needed if like everyone was just like us on the entire planet, we need at least 6 Earths to sustain our lifestyle as like for all 7.7 billion people.
Wow.
And that right there is like this moment people have, like, this actually is, but we also talk about the downside, and that is when you share and you talk about alternatives, and then they go home and they tell their parents how awful they're being because they're not doing any of this stuff. It's a fine line, that you have to draw. Can you imagine some like education programs, even like really early kinds of things that teachers could be involved in, or like resources that you've come across that teachers might benefit from?
I know that like there are maybe like schools could take students on field trips to like the environmental facilities in your area. In Tuscaloosa, we have like an environmental plant, I guess, and it's very kid friendly, and they show kids like the impact that all of these things have on the environment and how long things take to decompose in landfills, and like educate them in like a really fun way at like a young age. So like field trips, you could go on field trips to stuff like that. Yeah, there's several things that you could do to help educate students. I think something too is like with our club, we do like DIY stuff, fun to make. So like you can make your own deodorant, you can make your own toothpaste, you can make your own chapstick, and everything you use to make it is recyclable or reusable. So that's kind of cool. That's one way like that you can make it just fun to educate people on like little things that they can do.
And one thing I also know is that it's a big push right now in architecture schools to talk about green architecture and how do you design that into buildings. And so I would imagine you could take your kids on a field trip to a green building, and say, why is this green? Can you look around and kind of see how the strategies have been worked out in the building, stuff like that.
I think that's such a key thing that you've mentioned, shifting our culture from recycling minded to sort of consuming less, because we as Americans are such consumers, and we just, in a way, love to be defined by that. I read an article recently that was talking about cheap clothing, that there was this push from a marketing standpoint that every season you have to have new clothes to match that season. And so they're making clothes cheaper and cheaper with the expectation that they're just disposed of at the end of a season, instead of something that you wear continually and hang on to. And so it really is just such a culture shift from I have to have all these new things to I need to invest in something that will last and follow me throughout my life as long as it can. I think when people hear conservation, going green, changing the earth in a positive way, they think it's such a big picture item. And I've even had people say this to me, well, I don't think that I could affect anything on a global scale, so I just don't even think it's that important. I might be able to change something in my immediate circle, but changing something on a global scale is too big and nobody's going to participate. And China's over there producing more pollution than anywhere else in the world. And so I just don't think it's that important for me. What would you say to those people who think it's too big of a task for them to get involved in?
Well, one thing, like when you make a change, you can cause a chain reaction of changes. Somebody might notice that I'm using a refillable water bottle all the time, and you can start a conversation with someone about that, and you can impact your family and then the people that they all know. Like as a Christian, you think about it too, like if you have the same mindset, like, oh, I'm not going to make a big change, like it's not going to really matter if I tell one person about God, because like they might not decide, then you think like you might as well try. It's never any hurt in trying to make an impact and controlling what you can control. Like if you're sinning, like you're like, oh, God's going to forgive me for sinning. So what does it matter if I keep sinning? Like it doesn't matter. Like I'll just keep doing it because God's going to forgive me, and like it's not going to make a huge change, but it does make a huge change. So if you think that you're not going to make a worldwide impact, I mean, you might not make a worldwide impact, but it's kind of like personal conviction. Like, you are doing what's right as a steward of the earth, as a Christian, as a human who lives here. Like, you're just taking responsibility for your actions, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, because Christianity is not free from having a voice in this issue. In fact, I think Christians should have the best answers when it comes to climate issues. Especially, there's kind of a buzzword that's been going around Christianity for the last few years. Creation care is such a big thing, and it, instead of sort of this selfish, we've been given dominion over this world mindset, it says instead we've been made stewards of this world. God's entrusted this world to us. In fact, his first commandment was tend the garden to Adam and Eve. So where do you see Christianity fitting into this issue of environmental concerns and creation care?
Yeah, I even looked up before this, like, what the Bible says about creation care too, and I found more verses than I have before that talk about how God has given us the command to take care of the earth, and then there's consequences for not taking care of the earth. Like in Psalms 24 and Psalms 89 and 1 Corinthians 10, that this is the Lord's earth. It's not our earth. Like, the earth was a gift to us from God to live for now, but like, if you are renting someone's house, you're not going to trash their house and like give it back to them and be like, oh, here's like your house back, we totally destroyed it. Like, you would give it back to them nice and clean. So it's kind of the same way. And then in Isaiah, there's references to consequences for humans not taking care of the earth. And they talk about it like in the Old Testament and the New Testament, the consequences for being disrespectful and polluting the earth. But then as a non-believer too, you live on the earth, so you might as well take care of it, because we all share the same home. So it can like unite Christians and non-Christians, which is kind of cool, because we all are sharing it and we all have to live in the impact of it, and future generations are going to have to live in what we make of it now.
So what would you say to somebody who is looking for a way to get started? They have some concern for the environment, they're wanting to do something, but maybe they're overwhelmed by the size and scope of sort of a globally wide strategy. What would you say to somebody, just some practical issues that they could start looking at, some practical things that they could do in their life to make them a bit more faithful in this issue of creation care?
You could start by just looking at your trash, like what's in your trash that you are making. And like, if it's a plastic water bottle, take that and be like, I'm going to use a reusable water bottle now. And like, just start there. There's things like toothbrushes pollute the ocean a lot. There's bamboo toothbrushes, which are compostable. You could swap that out. Like, don't just go buy a bunch if you have toothbrushes, but finish the toothbrushes you have, and then when you need a new toothbrush, be like, okay, now I'm going to opt for more sustainable, more eco-friendly option. They're like, plastic razors are easily disposable. There's stainless steel ones, and some of the a little more of an initial investment. Like, it's a $25 razor, but you don't ever have to replace it. So it's like, you might spend a few $100s on disposable ones, or you could spend $25 on one that you never have to reuse, you never have to throw away, and you know it won't end up in a landfill or in the ocean. So those are a few things. And like, reusable bags at a grocery store is something that's really easy. It does take a little more mindfulness. You have to think about these things. You have to think to keep bags in your car and to grab them when you go into the grocery store, to use them. Ultimately, it has good results, and like, it really doesn't take much more time than it did before when you didn't think about it. So there's definitely a lot of simple swaps that you can make to get started. You can start with the 5 R's: refuse, reduce, reuse, rot, recycle. If you want to be inspired, you could look up Lauren Singer, who is the founder of Zero Waste, and she lives like completely zero waste lifestyle. and has all of her trash from the past 5 years that she's ever had in this tiny mason jar that's like that big. And she just, if she ever has anything plastic that she can't recycle, can't reuse or anything, she puts it in this mason jar. So if you want to be inspired, look her up because she does not make any trash.
Yeah, so people really need to look up her stuff online and see how ridiculously small her trash pile is. In fact, if you watch her stuff, it makes you feel like the trashiest person in the entire world. And that is definitely a standard that would be so amazing if everybody could get to that level, but it can be really intimidating, especially I would imagine if you were friends with her.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So she's definitely making a huge impact, and just to like be around her, I'm sure you like would be way more aware of the trash you're making. If you're friends with her, you're probably like, okay, let me not use plastic stuff when I'm around her. And so then that leads to the chain reaction of positive effects. So that's cool. You can do like a lot of little things like that. One of my favorite things, I got a book once, and it was like little things that you can do to make a positive impact on the earth. And it had just like lists of like one thing you could do. And one of them was if you go buy ice cream, go to an ice cream store, get a cone instead of a cup. So you don't have to throw the cup away and use a spoon. And I was like, yes, just an excuse. I was so excited. And so now I only get a cone. But it was like as if I needed one excuse to opt for a cone instead of a cup. I was really excited about that one.
I think I'm getting the message loud and clear. I'm taking away from this conversation, you should eat more ice cream and get it in more cones. I think that's some conservation efforts people can get behind. Well, as we kind of wrap things up and bring this in for a landing, what are some final words of advice you may have, or just some final exhortations as we move forward from this conversation for those who may be listening and just getting into the world of conservation and decreased consumerism?
I think just be aware that this is not our earth. Like, this is God's earth. This is a gift to us. So think about that when you go shopping and when you are like walking around a park. Just appreciate nature, appreciate the earth, and just be more mindful of what you're doing. Follow the 5 R's, and yeah, just like take care of the earth that we're given.
Those are such great words to end on, and I so thank you and so appreciate you being here with us. And I hope and pray that people really take their responsibility as citizens of planet Earth seriously, and especially we who call ourselves Christians that own the lion's share of responsibility for looking after this world. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, and happy Earth Day.
Yeah, happy Earth Day to you. Happy Earth Day to everyone that may be listening. And thank you for tuning in to Moments That Matter. We'll see you in our next episode.